All right, we're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming, guys. So today we're going to be covering advanced negotiation techniques in real estate. So a big part of my negotiation experience has come from 14 years of trading in real estate and selling well over $500 million worth. So there's been a lot of opportunity to make mistakes there and to learn from those mistakes to become a better negotiator for my clients and as well for myself. Something to consider as well, guys, is I did do my accreditation and certified negotiation expert to become an instructor for that. So that's part of my credentials. So I'm not just coming up with this on the top of my head. This is all tried and true processes that work. If everybody's got any questions, just throw a hand up and then we can talk about it if it's an opportune time. Otherwise, we can leave questions to the end. If anybody wants to have a little fun and maybe do a role play or something, we like to do that on our side of things. Happy to do that. So getting started, we want to classify what makes a negotiator an expert. So I'll just read you off the definition. A negotiation expert is someone who excels in managing the exchange of information between parties, securing an upper hand by gathering the most information while conceding the least. At its core, a negotiation is a power struggle. It's the simplest way to outline it. And people don't realize that negotiations are technically omnipresent in our lives. So, what that means is in every walk of life, in every scenario that you have, when you're having an interaction with another person, there is a negotiation that is taking place. No matter how minute it may appear, it is a negotiation nonetheless. Why is this important to recognize and understand? Is that if you are cognizant of these little negotiations that you have, you can identify patterns of behaviors of which you have and others have that are used in order to secure power. Now, when we say power, a lot of times there is a negative connotation to the word power. Power typically means how you will flex your authority or with somebody else. The irony is when it comes to power in negotiations, believe it or not, it generally is wielded in not a position of authority, but a position of knowledge, and generally is delivered softly. Most of the most prominent negotiators do not do so with an iron fist, they do so through influence. Influence is the most important thing that you can have when it comes to negotiation. Obviously, you want to influence the other person. There's two ways to get things: influence or intimidation, right? And obviously, we're not in the business of intimidating people. That's not really how you're going to have a long and fruitful career, let alone working with your peers in real estate. Something to consider when you're in a negotiation with another party, generally a realtor, maintaining your composure, being professional, being kind are all extremely important, because I learned this very early on in my career was that clients come and go, but the realtors, generally the vast majority of the successful ones, are going to be around for a while. So it's imperative to build a mutually respectful and beneficial arrangements amongst each other to secure longevity and success in your real estate negotiations. Should you continue to interact with this person over the course of your career, generally there will be a pattern of behaviors that will be linked between the two parties. And if you have secured an upper hand early in that relationship, you can benefit from a long
أكيد ما هذا
lasting
الأكيد.
relationship that will play in your favor.
بس في ناس
Sorry? Oh, we've got somebody who's not on mute there. If you don't mind, please and thank you. So we're going to go over the do's and don'ts very quickly. First and foremost, do's. Build rapport and ask questions. I put that at the top in number one. It seems really simple, guys, but when we go to the core of what a negotiation is or a successful negotiation, the most important thing you want to manage outside of everything is going to be the flow of information. The more information that you have available at your disposal, the better of a strategy that you can comprise in order to benefit your client and your position. A good example of this would be if you're going to go, say, two competing armies are going to war. One army just shows up, they may have a superior military. However, the opposing military force has gathered intelligence on the opposing force, their strengths, their weaknesses. They've done homework on the battlefield, of which they then chose to make battle at. They chose the time and the day. And the reason they've done that is they've chosen to select the landscape, the time, and the day that benefits them, their position, to the detriment of the opposing force. At the source of all that, the success of the battle can and often will be won by the not most superior force in force, but the force that has the most amount of knowledge about the environment as well as the opposing force. Same thing applies in real estate. If you're going to be negotiating with somebody else, you need to have information on two things. Well, three. The first is the real estate agent. You want to know everything about this real estate agent. So when you're building rapport and asking questions, you want to get to know them. Why is this important? One thing that I've been known to do is when I'm negotiating against another real estate agent, the first thing I'm going to do is pull up their sales history. I think you guys know where I'm going there. I'm not going to pull up their sales history to identify that they're a new realtor because I want to make them feel bad about themselves. That's not good. I want to pull up their sales history because I want to know how many transactions they've done in the last 6 to 9 months, because I want to know what their sales pipeline looks like, because I want to know how motivated they may or may not be to get a paycheck. If a realtor is about to miss their mortgage payment, they may be a little more motivated to nudge their client to take a deal that may not be in their favor because they need to pay their mortgage. Definitely something that you want to take advantage of at all times. Checking the sales history, super important. The other thing as well is you want to know, are you dealing with a veteran or are you dealing with a rookie? Now, keeping in mind, guys, just because you do a lot of transactions in real estate does not make you a good negotiator. It does not mean you're intelligent. It does not mean you know the business really well. There's some people that I've encountered in my 14 years that have a really good book of business, and they're grossly incompetent in just about every capacity I could ever dream of. It's like Channel 5 news situation. I think we've all had that encounter, and I think that's fairly safe to say. So gathering the sales history will allow you to figure out what their income currently looks like, what their experience is, and then also gives you an understanding if they know the market. So if you've got a person, for example, for me, I love doing it because I sell investment properties predominantly. I do residential. But if I've got somebody that says, hey, they've never sold a commercial property before, well, it's going to be a lot easier for me to work out sticking points or pain points between both clients because they may not necessarily understand the schematics of a deal. Things like conditional periods or even pricing, they may not have a real good idea. So when they're arguing with somebody who has superior knowledge about what's happening, that's going to be really good. So asking questions about the realtor, their personal life, all of those things, super important. And obviously, I'm not going to get into how you go about doing that. That's not the purpose of the exercise for today, but something that you could practice amongst your peers, your team leads, or you guys could DM me and there's opportunity there to talk about it in greater depths. So you want to make sure that you're asking as many questions as possible. Then you go on to the client. You want to ask questions like, why are they selling? What's going on with their lives? And oftentimes you're going to end up with a stonewall because if you're a good listing agent and we're talking about a strong negotiation, it's not just about being on the receiving side, but it's also what you're giving away. So ideally, when you're speaking and responding to somebody asking questions, you want to build the rapport and build the relationship as well. But it's kind of like spy versus spy, right? It's kind of the type of game that we're playing. You want to make sure that you're offering to them the least amount of important information as possible. Right? So you're going to talk about things that are less important, your sports, what do you like to play, what your kids are like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, if you have a lot of experience, you can speak to that. But if you don't, you want to stay away from giving away because most realtors will not have figured out how much you've sold. They haven't looked at it. So you want to keep that quiet for a newer realtor that doesn't have a lot of experience. Getting to know the client, then you want to ask questions that they may not tell you why they're looking to leave. But there are questions that you're going to ask that will lead you to understand why. So for example, if you're selling a 3-bedroom townhouse, when you ask them why they're going to sell, they're not going to tell you exactly why. They'll say, well, it's just time to move. They decided they want to be closer to family. Okay. Closer to family is a good one, right? That's an answer I would give in a scenario such as this. What actually is happening, it's a 3-bedroom townhouse. They currently have 2 children, married. and they're currently expecting twins. Well, guess what? It's now understood that they're moving out because they're moving closer to family because they're now going to have 4 children. And those 4 children are actually going to need some parenting, and the parents are busy. So they're going to have grandparents now helping with the kids. That's actually why. And the reason why this is important is if they're actually moving away to be closer to family because they have 4 kids, it means that they don't have enough room in this house to accommodate the amount of people that are going to be living there. And they have a pretty, a big, what was I saying? They have a big family, a big growing family, and they're going to need support. So in my mind, as a negotiator representing a buyer and they're the sellers, I'm going to be bearing down on the fact that, hey, listen, they're going to want to move close to their family. So we know that we could take a harder stance. If the time is ticking, you ask them, what's going on there. I've got twins coming. You want to get into knowing the family structure. And if you understand that, it gives you the opportunity to know that if they're approaching the time of birth, then they're going to be more and more motivated as that time goes, especially if you're in a market, which is say a balanced market or a buyer's market like we currently have. So it's empirically important, guys, to understand the buyer, the structure of their lives, what are they going on, what do they like doing, and also the property. So for example, negotiation doesn't always just happen with the client on the other side. You have a client. So there's technically 4 negotiations. We'll say 3 negotiations that you're involved in. There's a negotiation with the listing agent, right? Where you're working with them, trying to understand their information, who they are, what they're at, trying to understand how can you use that information to benefit the outcome for your client. That's one negotiation. Then there's a negotiation with the client, right, through the agent, where you're trying to secure the best terms for your buyer. Then there's the third negotiation, which a lot of people forget, and this is actually the most important part, and I want you guys to highlight this as the most important. The most important. The negotiation with your client. And why is this so important? Your client may have found the perfect property and they decide that they want to buy it, but they have an unrealistic expectation in their minds, or they may have an unrealistic price in their minds. Is it to your benefit to allow your client to not purchase a well-priced property because they believe in their mind that it's not good value? Think about that for a second. I've seen this a lot, by the way. A property's worth 500 grand. You could get it to them for 485. You know it's a good deal. Your client says, no, 470, that's it. They can afford it, but they don't want to. Are you doing your client a service by allowing them to walk away from the deal? The seller and their agent has done a great job in the negotiation. They've secured a great opportunity for your buyer. They've put it on the table. Now what? Your client doesn't see it. Now that negotiation needs to take place where you are going to manage that negotiation with the buyer. Why is that important? Okay. Or how do you do it? Sorry. How do you do that? So you ask your buyer, is $10,000 on the purchase price, which equates to probably a couple dollars a month on a mortgage, going to keep you from exercising? And then you would go down what it is that this townhouse for them. So for example, if they are the ones that are expecting a baby and their parents live next door, say, is it worth walking away from this property and having your 2 children being away from your parents and living 4 kids in a 3-bedroom house? Is that something that is okay with you? Right? And then there will be a power struggle there. But that's, again, having information about your clients, their needs, why they're buying is just as important, if not more important, than the other side. Because you have to, we call this managing your client. There's other ways as well. Sometimes the seller on the reverse scenario says, I want $10,000 more for the property than what it's worth. The market doesn't really permit that price. It's not great, but there's not really anything going on in that marketplace, right? And the seller or the buyer really needs this property for whatever reason. But what you've done is you've gathered information from the seller and the seller's agent and the seller's client, and you've done some of your own homework, and you've discovered that there is a new development that is going to be built down the road, some commercial land, bus stop, light transit, et cetera, et cetera. And then we should expect to see a 10 to 20% increase in the value of that property over the span of the next, say, 3 to 5 years. What is a great way to talk to your client to say, hey, listen, you might be overpaying by $10,000 on, say, a $300,000 house, which is, what is that, like 3 or 4% or something? I don't know. However, I've discovered that the property is going to appreciate by 2 to 3 times that amount in the next 3 to 5 years with the following things that are going to happen. That is a negotiation with your client. Don't forget that. People, I think, forget that we must negotiate with our clients because, yes, they may pay $10,000 more. But say, well, Marc, why would you tell your client to overpay? I'm not telling them to overpay. I'm recommending to my client to get into an opportunity which I feel is good value because there is some accrued appreciation which is coming in that he will be able to take advantage of, and that house will appreciate at a higher rate of return than a house in another neighborhood that has good value. For example, a house down the street, or not the street, say 2 neighborhoods over, it's a great deal, 10 grand under asking. But the reason it's $10,000 under asking is because there was a flood there that happened 3 years ago, and the insurance is triple in that area, and it's a little bit harder, and it's giving that area a pinch, which has happened to a neighborhood in Canada. I discovered like 12 years ago when I first started in the business. 14 years ago, but 12 years ago is when I did that deal. It was a great deal, but we had found out that the neighborhood had some problems. Okay, that covers that. Crafting a strategic negotiation plan. I cannot stress this enough. It's exactly like when you're doing cold calls, when you're going on a listing presentation, when you're going on a buyer consultation. Anytime you are going to approach a potential transaction or a negotiation, you must be ready. I'm not going to focus a lot on this because it's kind of like it's something that speaks for itself. In a nutshell, when you're going to go into a negotiation, strategic plan is gather information. Who are you talking to? What is it about them? What are their criteria? What are their experiences? Everything about them. Gather as much information as you can. And then establish winning points and losing points. And what do I mean by that? Winning points, for example. What is important to your client? Price, terms, closing. Those are the big ones, right? So depending on what it is that your client wants, you have to be prepared to take losses or make sacrifices. I don't know if any of you guys play chess, but a negotiation is very much like playing chess. So basically, you offer up an important piece sometimes and you make it out to be, oh no, I'm giving up something important. I'm giving up something good. When the person takes the bite, that's because you have another piece that's going to take that piece and it sets up the board for a checkmate. Same thing in a negotiation. Having a plan is to say, I want to know this information. I want to have these things established. I want to have this price for my client, and I want to have this closing for my client. What are the most important parts and sticking points? What are the things I need to die on the hill for? And what are the things that I'm willing to give up, to sacrifice in order to get the one I'm dying on the hill for? That's the most important. That's how you go about it, and you build everything from there. Recognize patterns and adjust communication styles. So this is a big one. Why is this important? When you're negotiating against another realtor or with your client, if you're fired up, you're excited, or you're running from listing to listing and you're super stressed, and you get on the call and you're negotiating because you've got 5 minutes and you're speaking on a higher tone, you're speaking a lot faster, and the other realtor is a little more reserved and more conservative, it's exactly like if you were in a friendship with them and you're going for coffee together and you want to chat. If you're behaving that way, you're going to put them off. They're not going to listen. So there's a model that exists because back when I was in my younger days, I pursued policing as a career. I did all the schooling and all that stuff. I decided I was going to stay in sales. One of the things they taught us was there's a communication metric that says over a certain tone, the higher the tone, the louder the person, the less they hear you on the other side. And why that was important is it said if you've got two people and one of them is yelling and the other one isn't, one yells and then the other one yells. The other one yells, the other one yells louder. And eventually they're yelling so loud and they're so high up there that they're literally not able to communicate anymore. And this is how things become physical. They don't get physical in real estate, God forbid, but you may have communications with realtors that are not favorable, and then they end up out of control. We always want to maintain our composure. We want to be calm. We want to be collected, and we want to be professional at all times. So when you're communicating with another realtor, you want to be calm, you want to be collected, and you want to match and mirror how they're working with you, unless they're escalating. Okay. Escalation is something where you do not match and mirror. But if somebody is communicating with you in a way, like for example, you got people that are highly dominant, such as myself. What that means is I need access to information quickly, effectively, and Cole's notes. If you're communicating and trying to negotiate with me, and you are literally going to write me a book, I will hear you for a minute or two, and then it's like, it's gone. It's not even that I don't want to, it's just I don't communicate that way. And I will, as a professional, that's how I will actually tell the other person, hey, listen, I totally understand where you're going, but can we just high level Cole's notes? Let's just bat this out. But it's really important for me, so I understand the information you give. It's got to be compile it, shorten it. If somebody is a little longer on the other side, then you want to tell them a story. If it's too short, then they're not going to get it, right? It depends on how their emotions are. The other rule of thumb, do not negotiate via email or text message, please. I don't want to go over that one in great details, but guys, we are paid crazy amounts of money to do what we do. Crazy amounts of money. If you're sending text messages or emails, you are literally falling short. You are literally falling short. You're not earning your living because you cannot tell tone. You cannot tell what they're thinking. You can't do, in some cases, if you do in person, body language. Those are all super important, guys. Please don't. I'm just going to say that you're not an expert if you're doing it via email. It's just not good. Yeah.
Mark, I just want to ask a question about that. So
yeah,
I agree with you about the phone thing because I feel like that's for tonality as well and to understand the other side. And for me, I see it as like I'm planting seeds in the seller's brain through their agent, through what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and all that, and justifying our needs and wants in that negotiation. So, but what happens, like sometimes you'll have clients, and I build, trust is so important between the client and the realtor, but in some cases, people are so skeptical nowadays. And if buyers will ask you like, oh, are you negotiating over the phone? Is this in writing? So do you still like, I'll still do it over the phone and I'll just tell the agent, hey, I'm going to like send you an email just to have like a paper trail of what we just spoke about. So that if the clients ever come back for due diligence or, whatever, if Rico ever comes back, there's a paper trail of sort of like a recap of every phone call that we had. So is that?
Yeah. So Zara, that's a really good question. And it's a really good point. Let me tell you how I do it. And I do it this way because I'm involved in a lot of different aspects of business. So I've got, construction and all that other stuff that I do. And I've had quite a few partnerships over the years. And what I've learned is that good paper makes for good friends. So what you're saying here is people like it when things are done in writing. And I agree that there is a time and a place for that. You're 100% right. Now, what I would say is this, especially with my clients, actually, I don't do it as much with another realtor unless there's a sticking point. And I think that there's something that we got to make sure we get right is I will usually tell my client. So for example, if my client says, yeah, you know what, I'm prepared to pay, $20,000 more for this property. I know it's overpriced, but I understand that there's value in it into the future. So I want to make sure that, I'm okay with it, right? Of which at that point, 1000%, you can ask anybody that works with me. The first thing I do right after I get off the phone is to say, hey, Zara, just want to do a quick summary about our conversation. I just want to make sure that we got it really clear so that as you're considering if there's something you want to do, or if they've done it, I say, I just want to put this into an email real quick so you can give it a second glance over to make sure that it's entirely clear. The following terms, X, Y, Z. Does this make sense to you? Can you just reply that you understand? And now this, what it does is it gives me a paper trail with my clients. And the reason is, say 3 years ago, I sold a property to a client because of something, whatever reason. And all of a sudden they decide they want to list their property. Like say they overpaid. And I'm like, guys, you're overpaying for this. You're probably not gonna be able to sell this for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't want to see you in 3 years. And you asked me to sell your property for more than what it's worth. It's not gonna happen. So I just want to make sure that you understand you're overpaying and that's okay. And you know what? This is a forever home for you. Let's just be clear. If it's an investment, no. It's a forever home, so be it. 3 years later, they call you like, come list my house. Yeah, great. And I'm like, okay, guys, like it's market's down a little bit, but it's 50 grand less. Well, then where they might say, well, Mark, we bought this 3 years from you again, and you said that we can make money, whatever. I'm like, well, actually, let me go back to my email and just double check because I know we talked about it, and I'll have a summary. Okay. So it protects your interest. If that makes sense?
That totally does, yeah.
That's the best way to go about it. But, and keep in mind, guys, when I say, I shouldn't say it, never and always are bad words to use. So let me just correct myself there for a second. You shouldn't email negotiations. However, there are times where it's appropriate if we're busy and we're slammed, and it's something simple that does not, it's not something that doing it by email is going to harm your client. So for example, if you know that things are going well and you're pretty sure, you're saying they want January 5th and your client wants January 8th, you fire an email and go, hey, January 5th doesn't work. Is January 8th okay? And they go, yeah. And like, that's it. Like, okay, like use your judgment. Like I'd say to my kids, use ta patate, means use your head. So there are times where you can, but again, use your judgment and be mindful. Now, the biggest pillar, and actually, I'm going to ask this as a question. I'm curious who's going to come up with this. What is the number one most powerful word in the English language? Someone want to take a jab? Yes. Yes? It's pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty close. If there's any Christians that say Jesus or something, that's a name, doesn't count. Anyone want to take a crack? Anybody? Great. This is really good. Why this is good is I'm going to blow your minds because you guys are about to find out. The word help. Help is the most powerful word in the English language. You don't believe me? Walk outside your house and just yell a bunch of gibberish for no reason. Just yell a word. Say potato or yes or I'm free, whatever. Yell a word. People may look at you funny. Nothing's going to happen. Walk outside your house where people can hear you and yell the word help as loud as you can. What happens? People come running. Literally people that have never met you in their lives will come running and they're like, what do you need? Like, oh, by the way, my name is Mark. You said the word help. I'm here. It's like a summoning word. It's like it's the most powerful word in the English language. Why is that important in negotiation? Two things. I do this all the time. I'm telling you. Now, if you guys are ever negotiating against me, you're going to see it. My trick has been revealed. I'm screwed, but I'm going to tell you guys and just don't tell them I said this. If it's not your idea, it's their idea. If it's their idea, they're winning. So how's this important? I'm negotiating against somebody across the table. I want to get a really good deal from my client. We're stuck on 300,000. He wants 310. I've done some research. I know that this realtor is a luxury agent. He's decided to take this $300,000 listing because he's doing a favor for a friend, whatever, because I've done my homework. I get on the phone with him like, hey, so-and-so, listen, man, I need a favor. I need some help. There comes the word help. I always use, I need your help, man. Listen, I'm having a bit of a rough one. It's been a long day. I'm exhausted. I've been working with this client for a while. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. You've done a great job thus far getting the negotiation together. You're at 310. I think you've done a phenomenal job. And unfortunately, in this negotiation today, I've failed us. And why I say this is I've failed us because my client, I'm struggling to manage. And as a result, my client is not willing to meet you guys at the point that you're at. And I think that you're justified in your position. You've obviously have a ton of experience. You do luxury homes. You deal with people all the time. I'm sure that getting this moved on and off your plate is great, but I'm wondering if you can help me out and see if you could get it on your end and close the deal. Because right now I'm not living up to my end of the deal. I need your help to make this deal happen. What have I done? Most people have egos, especially real estate agents. Mostly. So I've basically taken a position of weakness, which is to say, and vulnerability, right? Is I'm not able to do my job. You're a superior negotiator. You're superior at managing your client than I am. You've done a really good job. So I'm asking you to give my client a better deal by making you think that you're better than me. Works like a charm. I'm telling you. I use it all the time. Like all the time. It's like my number one trick. So that's the number one. Number two, as I mentioned earlier, if it's their idea. So imagine you've got a group of people and you really want to go for pizza and they all want to go for hamburgers. Or, nah, it's a bad example. If you want to go for vegetarian and then they want to go for pizza. Well, rather than say to the group, I want to go for vegetarian because I don't eat meat, I don't, whatever. The best way to get the group to agree is that you make them tell you why eating vegetarian is a good idea. Now, there's an art form to doing that, but generally the most important part is to do that by giving them a sense that they're doing good or that they're helping something. So for example, hey guys, like I know for like just an example, guys, but there's 1,000 ways to cut this, but what you could say is, guys, I know the owner of this vegetarian place. I've known him for years. He's a great guy and I love to support his business. What do you guys think? You guys think it's a good idea to support a local business? Then they'll say, well, yeah, of course, we like the idea of supporting a business. Or you plan it out in a way where they make it their idea and then you ask them to agree. You agree with them. You see kids do it all the time. Kids are masters at this, actually. I'm pretty sure that they got this idea from children. So, curious, showing of hands, has anybody ever come up with this not knowing, or can anybody think of a scenario where they had a situation where they made somebody else's idea their idea? And then they won on that one. Like you get somebody else to make it their idea and then you agree.
Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, just for fun. Pardon me?
Did you say name somebody that took somebody else's idea and made it their own?
Yeah, somebody had as an example just for fun. I'm curious.
Like Nikola Tesla and like Alexander Bell, like how he took all his ideas and ran with them and took all the credit.
Yeah, well, that's something that he would have stolen his ideas from him. But a great way would be to say, for example, let me think of something. Oh, you want to buy a new car. Your car's all beat up and your spouse says, I don't want to buy a new car. Right? So if you want your spouse to agree with you to buy a new car, well, what's a good way to get your spouse to now say that they want a new car? You say, for example, I have an electric car and my range is 200 kilometers. And the car wants a diesel and it could go 500 kilometers, or it's a truck. I want a truck. I'm done with the electric car. I don't want to do it no more. Your spouse says, well, no, you just bought that car. It's a waste of money. I don't want to do that anymore. Okay. Then you say, hey, by the way, you guys, this is just an example, okay? It's the only thing that comes to mind. So you tell your spouse, who, for example, loves to go camping. You say, hey, you know what I was thinking? Why don't we go camping this summer? There's a couple of places that I really think you would enjoy. And how about I pick them out for you? And then you pick all these places that have 300, 400 kilometers away. So it's 300 kilometers there, 300 kilometers back, 700 kilometers. Well, your car or the vehicle you have will only get you 200, 400. Then you tell your spouse, you go, oh, that's great. And then you get them all excited. It's like, oh, great. We're going to go camping. This is great. You go, I just thought of something. Bad news. Our car, it can only go 200 kilometers. How do we get around that? Guess what? I want to go camping. Let's sell the car. Hey, you know that diesel truck you were looking at that does 700? Is that still available? Let's go look at it. Let's go take a test drive. Right? That is getting something you want by positioning an argument in a roundabout way that leads to that person wanting what you have, and then you agree with them. It's their idea. The only way to do that is by motivating that person to want what it is that you want. And that takes a lot of creativity. Don't do that with your family that's manipulative, but do it in a negotiation. Does everybody understand that? Or does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So last thing I'm going to cover, and then we have a couple minutes for questions. What I'm going to cover is identifying pleasure and pain points. This goes down to collecting information, but I want to get a little more granular. Because when you're going in your meeting with people, or if you're making a phone call, you're doing a phone call, people make decisions on two metrics generally when they're making a change. Okay, this is around changing, which we deal with in real estate because they're changing their living circumstances. They're doing so on pain or pleasure. And why do I get granular on this? Because remember we talked about planning earlier and how important it is to plan. In my toolbox, in the things that I need to establish, I 100% will not stop gathering information until I get a pain or a pleasure point for a decision. So a pain would be, I lost my job. I need to have a more affordable lifestyle. I need to save money. That's a pain point. Now they're going to make changes in their life and their living in order to accommodate this new way of life. A pleasure would be, I'm expecting a child. I got a promotion at work. I, came into some money. These are all pleasure. And then the reason why that's so important is because I'll give you guys an example, and this is where I'll end it. I was dealing with a negotiation. It was actually I was assisting and supporting a negotiation with an agent on my team. And the negotiation was around selling a condo that had been on the market for like 8 months or something. And the price had consistently come down. It was a great unit, but the problem is the condo fees were really high. And it was difficult to get the buyers to commit to the sale. Like we had a lot of people interested, but once they looked, no problem. Finally, we get an offer. The offer ends up coming in $20,000 less than what this seller wanted. There was some back and forth over the span of a day or two, and nothing was going on, and the deal was about to die. I was brought in. I was told the situation. And what I presented was this. I said, go back and tell the seller, look, you're wanting to sell this property because your condo fees continue to increase year over year, to the point where now it's unaffordable. Okay? So ask that seller, where are they going to be in 2 years or 3 years from now if the condo fees continue to increase at the rate that they are, how big a loss will they incur at that point in time when they're selling the unit? Then ask them, how good are they going to feel when, yes, they're taking a $20,000 haircut on what they want. However, their cost of living is $600 or $700 or whatever it was dollars a month less than what they currently have, because there was a place lined up that they were interested in that would be much cheaper and actually accommodated the lifestyle of that buyer or the seller much better in the second phase of their life, the next phase. And then we brought down the numbers to say, well, it's going to take about 1.5 years to make up the amount that you're making less on your property to make up the loss on the other side. But you get to enjoy the lifestyle that this property brings to you by giving you some freedom, because there was some in-law situation going. They were on top of each other. This allowed them to separate. So how much is that worth to you? Focus on that. Because if we just focus on money, 10 grand, and you stay stuck there, you're only doing 10% of your job. If you're stuck on price in any capacity, whether you're across the table with another agent or you're across the table with your client, don't stay stuck on money. This goes back to my initial argument at the beginning. If you ever read, I loved it. I read the book Sun Tzu's Art of War. I still apply this to real estate because you have to pick your battlefield. So what this means is if you're warring on price, you will lose. So you choose the battlefield, which is to war on person's pain or pleasure. Either you alleviate the pain or you bring them to the point of pleasure that they want. Okay? That is the most important. That's why you need to gather that information. That's why the pain and pleasure point is so important. And that's why I'm ending it on that note, is if you do not know what does and does not serve them, you cannot serve them. Simple as that. Okay? Now, we've got 13 minutes. Any questions? Not all at the same time. Does anybody have a situation or a scenario that's happened recently that went wrong they may need help with? Something that somebody's about to go in, they may need some advice on. A seller that they can't reduce the price on, they may want some advice. Sky's the limit. Okay, guys. Questions are up. If anybody has anything they need, you guys can DM me. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If there's any follow-up on something that I said, or even you want to push back on something, which I love, by the way. If I say something you want to push back, love that. You guys can reach out to me personally, and I'd be happy to chat on that. You guys have a wonderful day and go crush some real estate.